Oh boy, it's another video about banning Sol Ring. I bet you're excited. So today's video comes courtesy of the r/EDH Reddit, and this one is actually about content creators specifically. So I was really excited to read through this one and look at some of the responses because I too am a content creator and I have opinions. It's kind of my whole job. So Caustic Banana has a take here that I think is decently interesting. It's called Discussing Big Brain Deck Building Narratives. They say, in recent months, I've seen a lot of content creators talk out of both sides of their mouths about really powerful cards like Sol Ring. And I wanted to talk about the deck building narratives that content like this produces and see what people who are not content farming think. So I appreciate that this is aimed at people who are not me, and I appreciate wanting their opinions. But as a fellow Magic the Gathering player who's been playing this game far longer than making content about it, I also want to chime in just a little bit. It has nothing to do with spite. It's just an interesting conversation that I like having with people. Although I recognize that I'm basically having the conversation with, you know, the YouTube comment section, and maybe the people on Reddit if they end up seeing this video, who knows. Goes on to say, on the one hand, I think it's pretty broadly agreed that Sol Ring is one of the most powerful cards ever printed for the format, and it can work in pretty much every deck. If you're going to put it out, it's cheap to cast, it's the definition of an efficient turn, it doesn't eat a land drop, it's colorless, it's been printed a billion times, so it costs less than $1, and you can only stuff one in your deck. The thrill from being able to drop an early Sol Ring gives you significant hype for your game plan, but does come with the added risk of people changing their threat assessments. And in spite of this, I have seen content creators make videos about how your deck doesn't need Sol Ring. I know vids like that have merit in pushing your deck building skills to not rely on crutches, but on the other hand, if it's an extremely powerful card that is dirt cheap to include and can work in every deck, how are you not doing a disservice to people by trying to talk them into building something else? So I find this take to be incredibly interesting because it assumes that we all want to play the most efficient, broken version of Magic available. Like, if you take the claim, are you doing your deck a disservice by not putting Sol Ring in? The answer is yes, if your goal is always to make the deck as powerful and as efficient as humanly possible. But the thing is, that is only the case when you're playing 60-card Magic, or when you're playing CEDH. When you are playing Commander, you're playing a primarily social version of the game. And since you're playing a primarily social version of the game, there are certain bits of social contract that you're going to have a much better time if you observe. One of those bits of the social contract for really any game is that everybody should have a fair chance at winning. And you can make the argument that Sol Ring being in everybody's deck gives them an equal chance of that win happening, but I would argue that that's not really the case. Some decks benefit more from an accelerated turn from Sol Ring than others, but more importantly, once you have the Sol Ring in hand, a lot of gameplay decisions stop mattering less because you are, quite frankly, so far ahead of everybody else at the table. So if your goal is to produce more balanced games where people all have equal footing and all have a chance to win, then the Sol Ring being in there adds a monkey wrench into that problem. It accelerates you far further than any other mana rock. To produce the same results that Sol Ring produces, you need at least 2 2-mana mana rocks or 1 Worn Power Stone. This is actually the reason that Mana Crypt was banned out of the game. It was found that it produced these results where a player would get so far ahead of the game so often that those games that it was in was less fun. Yes, that game was far more hype for the one person who got the Sol Ring or one person who got the Mana Crypt, and then they got super far ahead from them, but Commander's a social game, and we have to take into account how that feels for everybody involved. Let me ask you a question. Why is mass land destruction banned in Bracket 3 and lower games? It's because of the game feel and game experience that mass land destruction produces. Why do we limit game changers for Brackets 1, 2, and 3? Because game changers warp the game around themselves, and having fewer of them in a game lowers the chances of finding them, and therefore, in theory, lowers the chances that they will warp the game around themselves. Now, ask yourself, why do these brackets exist? they exist to try to give a threshold for game balance, different levels that we can play at where the game can be expected to end on certain turns. In a deck that has Soul Ring in it, if it draws the Soul Ring and a Signet, that deck is expected to win 3 turns faster than it would have normally. And with a Soul Ring, it's expected to win 2 turns faster than it normally would. All of these are great reasons for running Soul Ring in a deck that's job is to win as fast as possible. I have exactly one deck with a Soul Ring in it, and it's my Azula Firelord deck. For me, Azula's a commander that can either be built bad or be built incredibly powerfully, so I built her as a bracket 4 Storm deck so that I would stop having to worry about whether or not I was going to build another Storm deck at some point down the road. But this is the deck where my Ancient Tomb sits. This is the deck where my Soul Ring sits. Cards that I normally would not run in any deck under any circumstance do get a pass here because it's a bracket 4 deck. I want to have those really, really down-to-the-earth games where anybody could win because they had an explosive start. When I'm playing brackets 1, 2, and 3, I want to ignore the explosive starts. I want games to be slower, more methodical. My goal when I sit down to a bracket 2 or a bracket 3 game is to have a balanced game with other people. I'm treating Magic more like a board game. When I start talking about what's the most efficient card to run in every scenario, now I'm thinking about bracket 4, where I'm looking at this less like a competitive styled board game and more like a straight up competitive game. So when you say it does a disservice to people by trying to talk them out of putting Soul Ring in their deck, ask yourself the question, what is the goal for a content creator asking you to remove Soul Ring from your deck? Is the goal to make your deck worse because your deck is better off without Soul Ring? I would argue that's not really the case. I would argue for most content creators, there are 2 reasons that the Soul Ring conversation is so prevalent. For one, many of us are very interested in people having fun games of Commander. After all, the more of you who are playing Commander and enjoying the format, the more there are of you to watch our content. It actively helps us. There is the more skeezy side of this, though, where content creators do engage in content farming, and therefore the Soul Ring conversation comes up a lot because it's a hot button issue. After all, it's a hot button issue that everybody has opinions on, and it is guaranteed to get people quite riled up when you start giving your opinions on Soul Ring. So there is that aspect to it. I don't want to deny that there is an aspect of content farming to it where we want to click things on videos that make us feel engaged, and oftentimes there is a level of rage bait that leads to engagement. Yeah, that is an aspect of it. But from a more wholesome perspective, from a less content farmy perspective, I personally want Soul Ring banned. I want it gone out of the game. And because it's not going to get gone out of the game, because it's not being taken away by Wizards of the Coast, the only viable option is to convince more people to not run Soul Ring because everybody has had the Soul Ring experience. Player 1 does a thing, Player 2 drops their Soul Ring turn 1 or 2, Player 3 says something about it, and by the time we have passed 3 more turn cycles, Player 2 is either down in the dirt, beat down by the 3 people for getting a far ahead with the Soul Ring, or they are so far ahead that it does not matter anymore. Both of these scenarios have happened multiple times at tables that I'm at. As somebody that wants to enjoy more Magic the Gathering, I want to limit these scenarios happening as often as possible. And as a content creator with a platform with a few thousand of you, what better way than to advocate for Soul Ring not being used in decks? Now, there is a note in the post that I want to get to that I actually think has a little merit, and that's that not running Soul Ring means that you have to flex your deck building skills better because you don't have to rely on as many crutches, and I think this conversation was more relevant back before the Game Changers list. I think now that the Game Changers list is a thing, we all kind of have a guaranteed list of crutches that exist in the game that we understand are that. They are cards that are so overly powerful, so overly tuned, they will make even bad decks shine like the golden sun. And so, yeah, there are crutches in the game, and a lot of content creators, we brew so much for a living. We make Magic the Gathering decks, and it helps pay our bills, so a lot of us, we like flexing our own deck building, and then as we start adapting deck building philosophies based on our own experiences, like any other functional human being, we start trying to pass those deck building philosophies down to other people. When you learn how to do something efficiently in a hobby, what's the first thing you do? You don't keep it to yourself, you start talking to other people who have the same hobby as you to see if they discovered a similar thing. I know for myself, when I started playing Magic the Gathering's Commander format as my actual format I played a ton, I began with the efficiency at all costs mindset because I came in from competitive Magic. I came in from playing Standard and Modern, and as a result of those things, my experience with Commander was playing Sol Ring, Vampiric Tutor, Mana Vault, everything I could find to possibly give me an edge. And then I got bored. It was a really disheartening experience for me. Just, I'd get the cards I needed to do a 2-card combo, and that would be it. My Sephiroth deck would have my Sephiroth deck would draw a Rooftop Storm, and I'd reanimate my Acerak, and as soon as I did that, the game was over. I just won instantly off of Infinite Dungeons. So I tried to take that out, and then I would get turns where I opened up with Sol Ring and my Signet and all that fun stuff, and so, you know, the ramp section started getting cut out of my deck so I could have smoother gameplay with less explosiveness, and then, as I found more infinite combos, I started truncating them down until it took me about 7 cards to go infinite in my Sephiroth deck. And with that, tutors, like even Buried Alive, started leaving the deck so that I could not artificially make that combo happen way faster. I had to rely on drawing it very, very naturally so that I could keep cards like Radiant Solar in my deck. Like, this is a card that enables a billion infinite combos in dungeon decks, and while I understand that and expect that to be a problem for a lot of people to deal with, I would rather run this card that is thematically attached to my deck, came in the Sephiroth Precon, and simply does work even without going infinite, rather than, you know, keeping cards like Buried Alive in the deck, whose sole purpose is to put exactly the cards I need in the graveyard to either win the game or stall out my opponents. I think it's way more fun to run the card that is thematically consistent with my deck, and this is the only deck I will ever get an opportunity to run it in, as opposed to the generically good card. And that's how I feel about cards like Sol Ring in general. I would rather run cards that make my deck seem more flavorful than run the cards that make my deck run more efficiently. As far as I'm concerned, if I still have my 25% win ratio when I sit down to a commander table, I'm good. Everything's great. I don't care anymore, because my goal isn't to win every game I sit down in. My goal is to be a threat. My goal is to be a table villain. My goal is to be entertaining. My goals are not necessarily to be the one winning. And because my goals are not necessarily to be the one always winning, I don't need to run all of the most efficient cards that produce wins more often. There was a note here as well. One of the actually top comments here from Cult of Neurosis, which I think is really interesting, is that you have to place the advice into context. In EDH, one of the central issues is power level alignment for pods. We see this in the old joke of everyone's deck being a 7, which of course was the joke everybody used to say that decks were not actually aligned in power because, well, everybody's deck was a 7. They'd all say their deck was a 7. We see this in how the CFP has explicitly tackled this issue with the bracket system. So where does Sol Ring fit into the story? The fact that Sol Ring is one of the greatest cards in the game and one of the most explosive cards in the game, ramping by 2 as early as your first turn, including being mana positive on the turn it's played, it is in every precon and it is not ruled to be a game changer. This means you can be playing bracket 2 and 3 and someone at the table will luck into a turn 1 Sol Ring. The deck that was correctly calibrated for bracket 2 or 3 with that turn 1 Sol Ring is now playing extremely far ahead, to the point that the end of the game could be partially decided by this play. This has the effect of those bracket 2 and 3 pods not feeling like they were correctly calibrated for 2 or 3 pods. But this issue wasn't with the other 99 cards in there, just the Sol Ring. And yeah, that's kind of where I sit. Like, I'm an advocate for banning Sol Ring. I'm an advocate for at least putting Sol Ring on the Game Changers list, but I certainly don't want it in Commander because, like the poster said, I agree with what they said when they say that if you have a perfectly calibrated bracket 2 or bracket 3 deck that produces a win by turn 8 or 10 or whenever the hell you're expecting, the Sol Ring accelerates that 2 to 3 turns faster, and if you end up having to deal with the Sol Ring, now suddenly somebody's used removal on a mana rock instead of like a game-ending threat like a Bolas's Citadel that they could have been holding up for that to give themselves a better chance. And yeah, that's definitely a value judgment for players, but producing the end result where they're having to make that choice all the time because of a turn 1 play that they didn't even get a chance to counterspell, I can definitely see a lot of arguments for removing it from the game. That said, I want to continue on with what they said, because I think there's a lot of merit to this. Banning and game changing are available to be used for play balance reasons, but the CFP is on record saying Sol Ring is an icon and that trumps play balance. So even the Commander Committee, that, Gavin is in charge of, that is dealing with bans and announcements and the bracket lists and all those things now, they've explicitly said that Sol Ring sits in the category of a game-warping card that should be looked at by that committee, but they will not because it is iconic. And that is not a good argument. I don't care that a card's iconic. I care about the play experience of playing with the card personally, but I'm not everybody, so they say it absolutely meets the criteria for needing intervention, but the CFP are not going to do anything about it. This has the effect of messing up the feeling of power level alignment for bracket 2 and 3 pods should an early Sol Ring hit the table. And this is where those videos and narratives are coming from. If the CFP isn't going to directly regulate the power level alignment in any way, then parts of the community take it upon themselves to follow through towards the desire of making any random bracket 2 or 3 pod with strangers someone sits down to a more enjoyable experience. And that actually feeds into what I said earlier. I directly, as a content creator, benefit more when you, the viewer, enjoy Magic the Gathering. I know it's a weird concept, but we all, as content creators, benefit a ton when you play more Magic and enjoy the game, and therefore want to engage in the broader community for Magic. And I'm really mad at myself that I could not summarize this video as succinctly as Cult of Neresis did. But there was one part of this post that I found completely baffling, and it's the most Reddit of Reddit responses you can get. Under this, this person right here says that, oh, well, where'd it go? There we go. They tried to counter the Commander Rules panel, the CFP, saying, did they use these exact words, that Sol Ring status as an icon trumps play balance? I'd love to read exactly what they said about it, and not just the blurb that they did in the bracket discussion post on the Magic website. And then, of course, Cult of Neresis did respond to this with the exact wording they said, and I'll go ahead and quote it here. You're correct that Sol Ring qualifies as fast mana and would otherwise be there next to cards like Mana Vault, but the truth is, it's Sol Ring, it's the most iconic card in all of Commander, it's something that has been here near the beginning of the game as a poster child for the format. Playing one Sol Ring is a universal truth handed down from Sheldon. Okay, so if you read this within the context of the broader article that it was posted in, which I've covered on my channel, Mana Vault is a game changer because it is a game balance decision to balance bracket 2 and 3 games. Sol Ring would be a game changer right next to it if it were not for it being iconic. So that is looking at its iconography as being more important than the game balance. And then, of course, this is where the most Reddit of Reddit responses come in. That's the blurb I remembered. There's no mention of balance. My guy, have you ever read a fucking book? The English language has so many synonyms and so many ways of piddling around a concept to communicate the same thing that can be communicated in a handful of words. It does not matter if the exact word balance was used. If you've got a lick of reading comprehension, you can tell what is meant by the post. There was another response in here that is just very short and succinct, and I like it. It's just From 04MMM here saying, for me, the downside of running Sol Ring is having less fun games. I know the argument isn't about this, but I wanted to hijack your comment to evangelize the no Sol Ring gospel. If you drop at turn 1 or arguably turn 2, you're so far ahead of the table that they need to focus you down first ASAP. Not fun for you, not fun for the table. It creates lopsided games. For this reason, we banned it from our playgroup. And, you know, I don't think I need to look at any more in the Reddit post here. I've seen some disagreements in here, but this video isn't broadly about a Reddit fight and the granularity of that. This is about why content creators tell you to cut Sol Ring out of your deck. And like I said, the two main reasons are we think, or a lot of us think, I can't speak for all content creators. I am myself, but for myself as a content creator, I think this game is more fun when it is balanced more appropriately for the players playing it. And I think that the two ways that you do that are by, one, having the brackets take care of some of these cards, and two, within your own playgroup, having conversations about what cards and combinations are fun and exciting, and which ones just make you kind of upset. Which cards and combinations do you not enjoy, and is there a valid reason for that? As a content creator, I benefit the most when all of you are enjoying the game, because then when I make a $20 deck that you can afford on Manipool right now, who's sponsoring the video, and you can check the description to find a link to them as they sponsor the channel, and they're freaking wonderful. If you were to pick up any of the $20 decks that I make, the likelihood of you doing that goes up greatly if you're enjoying this game. If you're not enjoying Magic and you hate Wizards and you hate everything about it, the chances of you picking up a deck are really low, and then the chances of you engaging with my content are really low. So now suddenly you're both not enjoying a game that you bought into, which is really cringe, but you're not enjoying a game, you're not engaging in content, you're not picking up products that actually help support the, you know, creators who are making content about this. We don't benefit from that. Like, no content creator benefits from your disdain if they are somebody who tries to, like, advocate for loving a game in whatever form. Nobody's happy in that scenario unless you're just trying to get the advertising dollars from people who hate Magic the Gathering. I'm not that person, so I'm not going to try to appease that crowd. And also, in lieu of being a content creator, I do tend to take on topics and take on decks that I think will resonate with an audience, at least to some degree. Sometimes I strike out and make a video about why you should play 60 card, and then nobody watches it or comments. And sometimes I make a deck that y'all all universally love, and then I end up making sequels to it and all kinds of fun stuff as a result. And who knows? The possibilities are endless, but I think content creators generally, a lot of us, especially me personally, I want you to enjoy Magic more. And I think you enjoy Magic more when your games are more balanced. And I think games are more balanced when they don't include Sol Ring. And, you know, I'd like you guys to get in comments fights about Sol Ring in the description or in the comment section, because that actively helps me a lot too. Engagement is the lifeblood of YouTube, after all. That's I do hope that I was fair in this particular conversation. I do hope that some of y'all maybe resonated with some of my reasons, or maybe even if you've got some major disagreements with them, then let me know in the comment section below. I know sometimes I can get on my high horse about a thing and then just get completely off base as a result of it. So let me know. I am an arrogant, narcissistic motherfucker, and sometimes I need to be kept in check. I recognize this. It's my personal flaw, and I have an audience that hopefully will point out when that flaw goes out of hand. That said, thank you very much for watching. Remember to check out the sponsor of this channel, Manipool, and there's an advertisement at the end about the channel playmat, all that other fun stuff. Like and subscribe, all that stuff that the algorithm loves, and hopefully I will see you in the next one. I've made the unfortunate mistake of making all fan art canon, and you guys use that to make a ton of doppelgangers of me that try to ruin my life. So why not go ahead and celebrate that cacophony by picking up the new channel playmat over on 4th Wall. When you pick up the playmat, take a picture and throw it up on social media tagging me so I can feature you in a future video.